Hard Knocks episode 1, all Aaron Rodgers all the time. Let's talk about it today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, August 9th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you're listening on a podcast source and enjoy the show, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out and help other Jets fans find the show. Well, the first episode of Hard Knocks in 2023 aired last night. And of course, the Jets are the team featured this year on the annual series on HBO and then also on the Max streaming service. And today we're going to talk about what happened in the debut episode. This is the second time the Jets have been the featured team on Hard Knocks. The last time was 2010. And that also happens to be the last year the Jets made the playoffs. So this is going to be probably the most meta episode of this podcast ever, because really this is a show recapping another show. And perhaps there will be some enterprising podcaster out there who will decide to do a recap of the Locked On Jets recap of Hard Knocks to tell you everything I did right and wrong in this episode. But I thought a really enjoyable hour of television watching last night. It's a reminder that when the NFL actually wants to put together compelling TV, it can do it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on NFL Network I'm just not a fan of. A lot of stuff that I just don't think is very informative or very entertaining. But the NFL has the ability to do this. The NFL has the ability to keep you compelled for an hour. And I think Hard Knocks is great every year, but I think it's especially great when the Jets are the featured team. And I think anybody who was worried about this being a distraction, I mean, Aaron Rodgers himself said it best last night when he was asked, why doesn't anybody want to do Hard Knocks? And he said something to the effect of, well, people think it's going to be a distraction, but it's really not. And Aaron Rodgers, without any surprise, was the focal point of the episode last night. Aaron Rodgers is obviously the highest profile player on the Jets, one of the highest profile players in the NFL. The trade that brought him to New York, one of the biggest NFL trades in years. Of course, he was going to be the focal point. And you got an inside look at, and you've heard this stuff from people in their public comments. I mean, a few weeks ago, I had Thomas Morstead as a guest on the podcast, and he kind of alluded to this. But you got an inside look at just how much Aaron Rodgers means to like every person in this locker room right now. And you see that, he's even gotten to know some of the support staff. I mean, there's one guy, one staff member who Rodgers pulled aside and he made sure he got on the camera because in 2010, when the Jets had it, that guy really was not a part of Hard Knocks. And you also saw that guys like, Mecole Hardman and Garrett Wilson, they were talking about how they grew up watching Aaron Rodgers and they idolized this guy. And, I don't think it was explicitly said, but it was kind of alluded to that, first of all, they're going to take in everything they can get, every piece of wisdom Aaron Rodgers can provide them, but also it feels like not that everybody in the NFL works hard, but they want to work especially hard to make sure that they perform up to the standards Aaron Rodgers is expecting. And I know, a lot of this can get into the area where, we're going overboard with the praise. And Rodgers himself said it best, everything that's happening there right now is great, but we got to win games in the fall. But I think the scene that really kind of sums up more than anything what the Aaron Rodgers effect is on this team was this one great throw that he hit. It looked like it was at the end of a drill, or maybe it was at the end of a practice. And the Jets were in a perfect defense. It's not so much that, the Jets were in a perfect defense, because I think if you give up, if you trade for a future Hall of Fame quarterback, those throws are expected. I mean, those throws you knew were coming. You knew that there would be there. You'll know that once we get to games, there are going to be some amazing throws that Aaron Rodgers will make because he's Aaron Rodgers. But I think what stood out to me was not so much the throw, but the reaction of the defense once they got back to the film room, because Jeff Ulbrich is happy. You usually are not happy when your defense gets beaten, and that's what happened to Ulbrich's defense on that play. the Jets, but he was happy because he said, what, we did everything we could. We were in perfect coverage. And sometimes a great quarterback just beats you. But the reason he was happy is like, hey, that's our quarterback. So when we get into games this year, it's not going to be our defense that gets burned by those. It's going to be the other team's defense. And Holbrook said, there aren't many quarterbacks in the league that can make this throw. So, you can see it, and you can even see it in the public interviews the Jets do. There's a spring in the step in practically everybody in this franchise. I mean, they've generated a lot of interest. They're going to be on Sunday Night Football for the first time since 2011, and that'll be Week 4 against Kansas City. And if you watch the episode, you saw I don't know if it's celebrities, because these are, for the most part, the people that were there were football celebrities. It was Curtis Martin, Tiki Barber, Jason Garrett. I mean, Jason Garrett, even that's kind of, I thought they played up the whole Jason Garrett thing a little bit much. I mean, I don't know if Jason Garrett going to your practice is as big of a deal as they made it out to be, but lots of really, lots of people who are at least known in the football community attending Jets practice. Jets are kind of the buzz of the league right now, and a lot of it has to do with Aaron Rodgers. And then there were some humorous moments within this episode. They kind of take you through some of the games Aaron Rodgers plays with his teammates. Most notably the pylon game, where you have to hit, you essentially are trying to, I guess it happens during downtime, where you're trying to hit a pylon, and it's 2 points if you hit it on the fly, and 1 point if you hit it on a bounce, and you're allowed to distract your teammates, or you're allowed to distract your competitors. So you're allowed to say anything you can, and it's from the movie Basketball. It's got kind of a concept that was taken from that movie. Pretty entertaining stuff. I thought the funniest part, though, was when the voice of God came in on Hard Knocks, and that's because Rodgers, in the lead up to the show, said that he wasn't a big fan of the show. The only thing that he liked was the voice of God, the guy who does the voiceovers. They actually brought this guy in on a helicopter. So like all the big names that they're showing at the Jets camp, only one came in on a helicopter. It was the voice of God from Hard Knocks. And then he and Rodgers chatted for a bit. It was really entertaining. And as I'm watching this, you just know that there are lots of little inside jokes with the Hard Knock staff that the voice of God is providing, and you just know that they're a lot of little things that they're probably laughing at. It was really one of the most meta experiences, because the voice of Hard Knocks is giving you all these details on how the show is produced, everything that's going on. So you can tell that the people who produce the show have a sense of humor, because they heard what the Jets had to say. They heard what Rodgers had to say in advance. And, as it turns out, it's really not that big of a deal to have Hard Knocks. I mean, watch that episode last night and tell me the Jets are going to suffer this season from distractions. It's not going to happen. But what you did see is you saw just how much Aaron Rodgers matters to the people in that locker room right now and the people in the organization. And, you can tell that there's a confidence within this organization that has not been there in the past. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to Robert Saleh. Saleh, for a head coach, I don't think got a ton of screen time in this episode, but he did have one memorable moment. It was at the very beginning. It was a speech that he gave to his team, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, continuing this Wednesday Hard Knocks recap edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. August is here, and you know what that means. It's the official start of fantasy football draft month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you have to do is one live snake draft. There's no waivers and no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. You can try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back, and even bigger, with $15 million in total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. And last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait. Time is running out. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON. That's one word with no space, LOCKEDON, to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON. Underdog is the easiest place to play fantasy football and the best place for best ball. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers, folks who tune into this podcast on a daily basis between Monday and Friday. And we're a daily show. We have new episodes each weekday and then bonus episodes as needed. Later in the week, we will turn our attention to the Jets' second preseason game. Jets are actually in Carolina today as they begin the first of a couple of joint practices with the Panthers ahead of Saturday's second preseason game. We'll get to that later in the week, though. Today, we're talking Hard Knocks. The Jets debuted last night, the 2023 season of the hit show on HBO, and you can also stream it on the Max app. So if you missed the show last night and you have the Max streaming app, you can just watch it over. Robert Saleh, for a head coach, I don't think he got a ton of airtime last night, and part of that's, look, everything was about Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the story of the Jets. In many ways, he's the story of the NFL. But at the beginning of the episode, Saleh was recorded giving a speech to his team. And I really do think Saleh is going to be one of the breakout stars of Hard Knocks this year. I don't think Saleh has really mastered the media game in New York. And that's an important aspect of being a Jets head coach. You have to know how to deal with the media. And there's kind of an art form of not answering questions, but sounding like you're saying something insightful. And I don't think Saleh quite threads the needle just yet, at least 2 years in. I think frequently he comes up with catchphrases that really sound kind of silly. I think sometimes he says things that, just he's trying to avoid a question. So he says things that aren't true, and it kind of comes across that it's not true. I think Saleh in his natural environment coaching this team is going to come off way better, because all the buzz you get is that the players really respect him, that he really does a good job motivating the players. And the episode began with him giving a speech, which I presume was the first day of training camp. Now, maybe it wasn't, but it kind of had the vibe of one of those first day of training camp speeches where he used the analogy to describe the Jets, eagles and crows, two birds out in nature. And what Saleh said was the crow is apparently the only, I don't know whether it's true or not. You'd have to ask Saleh. But he said the crow is apparently the only bird in nature that has the guts to try and attack an eagle. And what a crow does is, to attack an eagle, it lands on the eagle's neck and it starts pecking at the eagle. So how does the eagle dispose of the crow? It ascends. It just keeps going up in the air, and eventually the altitude becomes so high that the crow suffocates and falls off. So what's that have to do with the Jets? Well, the analogy Saleh was using essentially made the Jets the eagle, and anybody doubting this team the crow. And yeah, like there's always like the nobody ever believed us in us angle. I heard the Kansas City Chiefs actually used the nobody believed in us angle last year at the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs used that. But I think that there's something to this with the Jets this year. The Jets are the most hyped team in the NFL right now. Difficult to deny that. And it's easy enough to understand why. They made one of the biggest trades in years in the NFL. They've got both reigning rookies of the year, who we'll talk about in a bit, in Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. They've got other young talent on this team. There are big expectations for this team. And whenever you have big expectations, it doesn't matter who you are, there are going to be doubters. And I think that's especially true in the first year of any process, because this team hasn't accomplished anything yet. So naturally, before you've accomplished anything, if you're getting hyped, there are going to be people saying, well, hey, why are they getting so much attention? It's natural. And Saleh addressed it. And he said, he used the eagle crow analogy. He said, we need to be the Eagles. We need to be the eagle. Just keep ascending. Don't let that pecking distract you. That outside noise, don't let it bother you. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep going up. And eventually the crows will fall off, because the Jets will win games. And he made a great point. What I thought was an excellent point. You'd rather be in this position than be hopeless, because it's been 13 years since the Jets made the playoffs. And I'm not going to say that they've been hopeless in all 13 of those years. I'm not going to say we began training camp with zero expectations for any of those years. But there have been a lot of years where it's felt like the Jets were at the bottom of the league. I mean, I think back 3 years to 2020, and it was almost like I went and going, man, I can't wait to get this season over with, because you had Adam Gase in year 2. The team wasn't very good. They just traded their best player. And, I see Jets fans complain. They're like, well, why is everybody hating on us? Well, who cares? There's just noise. You'd rather be the team that's going in with real hope, because having Aaron Rodgers, it means you get a lot of hype. It also means you got Aaron Rodgers playing 17 games for you. Would you rather have low expectations, no Aaron Rodgers, or high expectations and maybe some people bashing you and having Aaron Rodgers? To me, that's a no-brainer. And I think the reason Saleh mentioned that, he kind of alluded to this at the end of his speech, is he's trying to motivate his players, because the NFL, everybody's good. And frankly, in the NFL, everybody works hard. But there's a question of, sometimes at the end of practice, are you going to take that extra 15 minutes to work with the machine? If you're a receiver, have the machine fire balls at you and work on your hands? Are you going to stay after practice as a quarterback, and which Rodgers will do? But are you going to stay after practice as a quarterback and work with your receivers? Are you going to spend that extra few minutes in the weight room? Because over the course of a long season, those things add up. Any individual one of those things, it doesn't make that big of a difference. But over the course of a long season, and over the course of within a 53-man roster, if everybody's doing this, everybody's putting in a little bit of extra work every day, that's the type of thing that eventually will make an impact. And Saleh is trying to motivate his team by, and look, that's a time and true tested model. You look at the outside noise, you look at the people who are critical of you, and you use that as motivation. And that's really where I think motivation kind of comes in. It's not so much that everybody's hyped to win a game on Sunday, but putting in a little bit of extra work. And again, everybody's working hard in the NFL, but just that little bit of extra work that over the course of 5 months, if 53 guys do, if you multiply it by 53, maybe it makes a difference here or there on a key play in a key game. And Saleh, you could tell that the players were really into it. I know some fan, I bet a speech like that will be very hit or miss among the fan base, but I think the players really bought into that. And it seems like the players really buy into what Saleh has to say. And like I said, I think he's going to be one of the stars of Hard Knocks when all is said and done. And while we didn't get that much of him last night, that was one of the most memorable moments of the episode, at least the non-Aaron Rodgers moments. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we will close out this Hard Knocks recap edition of our show. We'll turn our attention to some of the other things that happened, most notably a couple second-year players looking to make big strides, Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner. That's ahead here on this Hard Knocks recap edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. The Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday. We're talking about episode 1 of Hard Knocks. The hit series had its season premiere last night, and the season premiere was featuring the New York Jets. 4 more episodes to go. It'll be each Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time on HBO, and also streaming on the Max app. You can watch it. It actually drops at 10 p.m. on the Max app. That's how I watched it last night, so I can tell you that. But of course, it's still going to be available from now forward. So if you miss it Tuesday night at 10, you'll still be able to stream it on the Max app whenever you want to at your convenience. Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. Now, while most of the episode featured Aaron Rodgers, there were a couple other segments there. Some other players were featured, and one of them dealt with Garrett Wilson and kind of combined Sauce Gardner there. And Wilson talked about, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, Wilson talked about when he was a kid, he watched Aaron Rodgers. He's just trying to get as much information while he has access to this Hall of Fame quarterback. But Sauce Gardner was also got a bit of a cameo, and they displayed, these two guys go at it at practice each day. And, there's an old cliche, I think it's like iron sharpens iron. And I think you can get carried away with something like this, but the type of thing where, you're going up against one of the best players at your position every single day. And you kind of see the techniques that the great players use, type of thing that probably helps you out. And really, they showed a couple reps, a really good battle between the two Jets young stars players, one a receiver and one a corner. They also showed Sauce Gardner graduating from college. That actually was in the news a few weeks ago. Sauce Gardner had made his mother a promise. He left Cincinnati a year early to enter the NFL draft, which obviously was the right move. But he promised his mother that he would go back and finish college. And he talked about, he views himself as a role model. And Sauce later in the episode said to Aaron Rodgers, "I want to play till I'm 40 years old." So Sauce Gardner dreams big. And actually a year ago, we had him on a podcast episode for an interview. And he said his goal's big last year. He talked about wanting to be an All-Pro and wanting to win the Super Bowl. Like, he actually got the All-Pro as a rookie, which at the time I was thinking, man, he's got really lofty goals. I don't know if he's going to be able to hit that one. Well, he did. He became an All-Pro as a rookie. And I don't know if he's going to play till he's 40, but he's certainly as good of a corner as exists in the NFL. And then the show kind of ended with some footage of the Jets' first preseason game. So you got some interesting stuff in that. Zach Wilson actually, after that game, told us that Rodgers was the one who called the play that resulted in the 57-yard completion from Wilson to Malik Taylor. What they did not tell us is that before the play, Rodgers was even telling Zach where to go with the ball. He said, "Throw the ball to Malik." So that was interesting. Another thing that really stood out to me, and this is one I'm going to put in the back of my mind, and maybe it's meaningful, maybe it's not. The praise Robert Saleh was giving to Chaz Sherratt, who had an interception in the game and moved to the, made a good play moving quickly to the ball. Saleh praised his speed. Saleh, he was really gushing. He was very effusive in the praise. And I'm sure coaches are always complimentary of players who make plays in preseason games. But Saleh even said, I love this guy. And Surratt is in kind of a camp battle for a roster spot. And I wonder whether maybe that gave us a little bit of information. Teams don't like to give away a lot in Hard Knocks, even though it's a show with a lot of access. They don't like to give away what they're thinking in terms of roster decisions, and they don't explicitly tell you this. And maybe this is just Saleh speaking out of turn because he's excited about a young player. Maybe he's just going overboard because a young player made a play. But I'm going to keep that one in mind because that may just be an indication of who Saleh is giving the edge to in this roster battle at the linebacker position. So anyway, my conclusion, 10 out of 10, I think 5 stars for this episode. Really entertaining. I love Hard Knocks every year, but especially when it's the Jets, you get to learn about your favorite team. You get an inside look at the guys you root for each Sunday. And I'm looking forward to the next 4 episodes. But that's all for today. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out, help other Jets fans find the show. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.